All right, thank you. Thank you for everybody coming and joining us today. What we're going to discuss is how we can help our kids be a little more independent through establishing good habits and helping them become more motivated to get their tasks done on their own.
Jan, tell us a little bit about yourself. Introduce yourself.
Oh, absolutely. So I am a tutor with Educational Connections. I've been with Educational Connections for almost 7 years now. Before coming to Educational Connections, I was a classroom teacher for 13 years, mostly taught middle school math, few years in elementary also. But for the last 6 to 7 years, I've been tutoring students full-time, working with homeschoolers and students when they get out of school. I absolutely love it and have been able to work with some wonderful families in this area.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And if you're wondering, my name is Nicole. I work at Educational Connections. I actually take the phone calls and do consultations with families to try to help them get matched up with our tutors. So during the webinar, if you can please hold your questions. We do have a Q&A section that you can put your questions in. If you'd like to use the chat to just share maybe thoughts or ideas or resources that you would like to share with other people, you can put it in the chat section. But please put all of your questions in the Q&A so that Jan and myself can address those when the time comes. And just to let everyone know, this is being recorded. So everyone that has registered for the webinar will get a copy of the recording. All right, Jan, take it away.
All right, great. So what we're going to do today is we are going to discuss ways that we can help our kids be more independent. We can help them establish habits and help them become more motivated to get tasks done on their own. So what I'd like to start with is, what is a habit? A habit is something that we do over and over and over again. We talk about habits all the time. Oh, I'm going to start this, and I'm going to be in a good habit of doing this or doing that. But without knowing what a habit is, it's very difficult for us to establish these good habits. So a habit is something that we do over and over and over again. It has 3 pieces. We have a cue, something that triggers us, that tells us that we're going to do something. We have a routine, and then we also have a reward. You have to have all 3 pieces in order to establish a habit. Habits are formed over time, something that you do over and over and over again. And so whenever we're working with students, we are wanting them to do something that we are wanting them to create good habits, and we want them to do that over and over and over again. That's why we mention that whenever they are out for the summer break, that this is something that we would like them to continue to do over the summer months, so that it's not so difficult for them to continue to do it over the school year. Now, the brain links specific behaviors with rewards. What we would like for students to have is that internal reward, that, oh, I've accomplished something, I've completed something. And so that alone will help you form habits. But we know that's not always the case with our students or even adults. Now, when we're discussing rewards, we, like I was mentioning earlier, we have to have all 3 pieces. We have to have a cue. That's something that's triggering us to do something. We have to have a routine, and then we also have to have a reward. And like I was mentioning a moment ago, we want that reward to be an internal reward. Oh, I've gotten something accomplished. And we have that internal reward system so that we continue with this behavior, and then we'll establish a habit. But that's not always what happens, especially with younger kids. So what we want to do is we want to tap into what is the reward that will establish a habit for our child. So some examples of rewards, they don't always have to be pleasure or getting money or sometimes it's a food, or sometimes it's an activity with friends. It can be something as simple as less stress on somebody or less anxiety. And that can drive you to want to continue an activity where it forms a habit. So if these are the types of rewards that drive your child, these are ones that you want to attach to, a cue, a routine, in order for them to establish a habit. Bad habits will cause immediate rewards, but it is long-term harm. So what you want to do is you want to make sure that if you see a bad habit being created, you want to try to replace that and make sure that you have your cue and your routine and your reward in place. All right, so we know that good habits are difficult. They can be extremely difficult. Bad habits form very quickly because those rewards are so immediate. But we want to change that. And one way that you can do that is by having a clearly defined plan. It's very difficult for you to change a habit, a bad habit, into a good habit if you don't have a clearly defined plan. And so I'm going to give you some examples of that in just a couple of minutes. So something that we also suggest whenever we're trying to change, and we're trying to establish a habit or change a behavior that's not successful for us, and that is working on our motivation and thinking about our motivation. What is motivating us to want to do something or to change something? And then also recognizing what are some things that are keeping us from doing this. And when you are thinking about what is going to motivate you, and then you think about what can keep me from doing that, then that will help you start retraining your brain. And keeping those things in mind and what is motivating you and what keeps you from doing it, then you can go ahead and put that together to say, okay, this is what I can do to change this behavior. And then gradually it'll start retraining the way you're thinking about that activity or thinking about something that you want to get accomplished. All right, so forming positive habits. What we suggest whenever you're trying to change a behavior or you're wanting to form good habits, you want to keep it simple. And keeping something very simple, start very small. And having a detailed plan. So I'm going to give you an example. All right, so whenever I'm working with students, some of the students are having trouble getting their homework done. They, might get home and do other activities, forget to get their homework done. So what we do is we discuss, all right, let's go through what your schedule looks like so that we can come up with a plan. I want to keep it very simple though. So we'll talk about what they're going to do whenever they come home. Oh, when I come home, I usually have a snack. And then I will decide what I'm going to do for the evening. So then I'll say, that's a great time for you to have your snack and start your homework. So the cue would be having your snack. And then when you finish having your snack, then start working on your homework. So that routine will be working on your homework. And then the reward, you want the reward to be an internal reward as, oh, I have my homework done. And now I can do the other activities I had planned. I can watch a program I wanted to watch. I can play video games, or I can call a friend. A lot of kids enjoy maybe sports activities, things like that. So they will have more time for those activities that they enjoy. Now, if the internal reward is not present yet, then you can discuss with your child, okay, some of the other things that will help them be able to get that routine accomplished so that they can get their homework done and then do some of the activities that they want to do. So if you can link the reward with something that you know that your child wants to do, then that can get them to complete the task and hopefully start forming a habit. So when I get home, I have my snack. I get my homework done, and then I can do all those fun activities I have planned for the evening. So again, linking a behavior to a cue, like getting home, having a snack, and then repeat that behavior over and over and over again. And then also, some of the rewards can just be as simple as I didn't let somebody down, or I was able to support somebody. A lot of kids find that as a very, a reward that they use as my classmate needed me to do this. And so that was an internal reward that they had. I was able to complete that task and help my friends and work on those projects with my classmates. So that does tend to motivate a lot of kids to get tasks done. All right, so what I'd like to talk to you about for a couple of minutes is habits of top college students. This is something that I share with a lot of the students that I work with, the parents of the students that I work with. There was a survey that was done, and it was top college students. And they were asked, what habits do you feel that you formed early in school that helped you become so successful? And these were top college students that graduated at the top of their class and had jobs out of college. And these were the habits they felt that they formed early on that helped them become so successful. So the number one was they learned to plan ahead. They knew that if they had certain activities that they needed to get accomplished, or they had assignments that they needed to do, they would plan ahead and make sure that they were able to get those accomplished and get them done on time. They also knew how to divide up tasks. So if they had an assignment that was due, or a project that was due at the end of the week, they knew how to break that assignment into little pieces and get it done throughout the week so that they could still enjoy all the other activities that they had planned. All right, they also, which is really important for a lot of students I work with, is being able to manage their surroundings. That they know that if I need to get something done on the Google Classroom, I have a laptop or I have a computer that has Wi-Fi that I can work on. If they have to print something out, they have a working printer. If they need to graph something, they have graph paper and they have their calculator. So being able to manage their surroundings and have the supplies that they need. Also, being actively engaged in their study time. So whenever they schedule time to get their homework done, and I'll use the example that I was discussing earlier, whenever a student would come home from school, their cue would be to have their snack and then start their homework. So during that homework time, they are actively engaged in their homework and just doing the studying that they have to get done. They're not being distracted by their phone or by the television or other things that might be going on. They're making sure they're in an environment that they can be actively engaged in that assignment so that they can get it completed during the period of time that they have set aside. And then the fifth one was that they didn't cut corners. They completed their assignments. They got everything done. And they wanted to make sure that they had everything done and that they had checked their work. So these are very important habits that the earlier we can get our kids establishing these habits, the easier school becomes in middle school, high school, and especially college, because college is where these habits are shown as if they have them established, because they don't have parents with them, and they are able to hopefully at this point get everything accomplished because they've established these wonderful habits along the way. All right. Okay, so these are some habits that that we do through our company whenever we're working with some of our families. These are some of the habits that we want to help establish whenever we're working with them. We having organized backpacks, folders, so that they can easily find their assignments. They know what they need to work on. They know what assignments are due, and they're able to find these quickly because they have an organized system. Also, a couple of the other things that we work on is setting up a plan on what they're going to accomplish, which takes you to one of the top habits of very successful college students, that whenever your child sits down, that they have a plan for what they're going to do for the evening or for that homework period of time. What do they need to get accomplished? And what do they need to accomplish maybe the next couple of days so that they can complete their projects? Also, getting into a habit of correcting their mistakes, checking their work. These are habits of very successful students. All right, so I also wanted to share with you an example of what we were discussing with what a habit is. So as I was discussing at the beginning of the presentation today, a habit, you have to have three pieces. You have a cue, you have a routine, and you also have a reward. And so I wanted to show you and lay it out so it will help you visualize what a habit would look like to establish a good habit. So let's start with a cue of, let's say your child has a messy backpack or a messy binder. All right, so the cue is, okay, my binder or my folder is a little bit messy here. I can't find all of my assignments. So what their routine might be currently is, okay, I'm just going to leave it. I can fix it later. I'll probably be able to find my things. All right. And their reward would be, okay, because I'm not going to fix anything right now, I'm going to have more time to play basketball or talk to my friends. And so that might be their current behavior. So they are establishing that as a habit, meaning their routine is not to fix it. We want to change that habit. And in order to change that habit, we would suggest going through some of those processes, trying to visualize what I need to do. What's keeping me from doing this? And then trying to establish a new habit, which is whenever the cue is, I see a messy backpack or a messy binder, I'm not able to find my things, let's change that routine. As soon as that happens, as soon as that cue happens, that triggers me, I need to get this cleaned up. I need to go ahead and start organizing my papers and putting them into organized areas of my backpack or my folder. And then my reward is going to be, I will be able to find my assignments. I'll know what I need to get done. And eventually I'm going to have additional time that I can do. I can play basketball. I can talk to my friends. All right. So laying that groundwork at the beginning helps a child change a behavior and establish a good habit. And then eventually they will have the additional time that they're looking for to be with their friends or some other activities. All right, I also wanted to lay out a detailed plan. Now, you don't always need to sit down and write out a detailed plan, but at least having a conversation with your child and going through these types of questions will help you understand what is the habit that we're trying to change and how we're going to do that. And then what are we going to do if something keeps us from getting that accomplished? What are we going to do? And then how are we going to get back on track? So having a detailed plan means answering these questions. And if you can go through and write this down, that's only going to make it even easier for you to establish this habit. But if you can have these conversations and then understand what do I want to do? How am I going to do it? And then if something gets in my way, what can I do? And then how do I get back on track? Okay. All right. Now, this I found so interesting. So I'm going to give you a minute to read through this. And some of you may have already seen this before, but if you haven't, it's quite fascinating. So I'm going to give you a minute to read this. And then what I'd like to do is open it up to questions. If you have some questions so that we can go through and discuss what we've just been going through today. All right. So some of you may already know who this is. All right. And this comes from, if you have read this, all right. So highly effective habits of highly effective teens. And who this is a habit. All right. So I found that I love that. So if you had already read the book or you've seen this, I know it's out there quite a bit, but it is quite interesting, especially whenever I share it with kids and they're like, oh my goodness, that's great. So, all right. So I hope the information that we went through was helpful. If there's any questions that I can answer, I would absolutely love to do that.
Yeah, Jan, we have our first question is, what if the homework is on the computer and as soon as they get on to do homework, they just play games or watch videos, or they say their homework is already done? Do you have any suggestions for parents on how to combat that?
Yes. Okay. So that is a fantastic question because you are not alone. This is something that I talk to parents about all the time, and it is very difficult. It's even difficult for adults to not get distracted on the computer. So I totally get it. But it is something that it can be difficult when a student is working on the computer and they have research that they have to do. They may end up going into other areas. So what I usually suggest is that they have a system of what they need to get done. And if they have that written out, their plan written out, what they need to get accomplished. And then they also need to have on there things that they do not need to go to, sites they do not need to go to, so they can keep themselves on track. Now, I do have students that will block themselves from other sites. So whenever they are working on Google Classroom and they need to get things done, they have actually blocked themselves from other sites so that they can stay focused. And then they can go through and get things accomplished. I also suggest is a reward system on what, whenever I get this done, my reward is going to be this. Now, going on to and playing games and things like that, that is definitely getting them off their task. So what we would want to do is make sure that they know these are the things I have to get accomplished. And let's give a period of time that it usually takes me to do that. So I'm going to give you an example. I have quite a few students that this does happen to. And so what I'll say is, okay, so what do we need to get accomplished? So we have a to-do list. All right, how long do you think it'll take you to do this, 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 and this? And they have their period of time set up. All right, now as you get that done, let's check that off. And then let's go through and check that off. If they are going to other sites, then they're not going to be able to accomplish that. Some students do need that sense of accountability, somebody checking in on them and coming in. And so as a tutor, when I'm online, they will go through and do their assignments. Okay, we thought that this was going to take you 12 to 15 minutes. I'm going to give you the 12 to 15 minutes, and then I want to check in on you and see how you're doing. Now, this is something that is habit formation. So if they are in the habit of getting off task, then it's something that we want to go through that detailed plan, like we were just discussing. What are we going to do if this happens? What are we going to do if that happens? And then that will help them get back on track and hopefully start forming good habits. But I would suggest with those students is having accountability and then setting up a very detailed plan and a time schedule for those students.
Thanks, Jan. We have another question from a parent from the chat that says, I have a child that has ADHD. He has a very hard time valuing the benefit of a future reward over a present reward. And he's very resistant to their helping him with planning like you laid out. Do you have any recommendations?
Yes, so this is an excellent question. And what I do with these, whenever I have these situations happen, this is common because we are looking for students to have the internal reward, but a lot of kids are not there yet, depending on their age and maybe the situation that's going on. So having a student that you are, or a child that is in that situation, I need to find out what rewards do motivate my child. And having a discussion at some point and trying to come up with a plan with the child. And I know that you mentioned that they were having a hard time having a plan, but I think I change whenever I do work with these students, I change it into more of a discussion of things that we can do that's going to motivate them. So I find rewards that have motivated them in the past and use those to help them establish a new habit. So without discussing, specifically what you're working on with that particular child, I would, at some point try to have a discussion on what rewards did work and how we can apply that to what habit or what activity they're trying to do. So, and then the main thing for that is keeping it very, very simple. Start off slow and then try to add new things as you go with that student. But anybody that has, more specific questions, I'm always available through email, and then we can, talk more and come up with a better plan based on what you're trying to establish with your child.
Thanks, Jan. Do you have any recommendations for software or apps? I know Anne has shared some on various webinars, like the one where the tree grows, where you're trying to do that. So any apps to help keep students on task versus playing video games or playing games on their phones?
Yes. Okay. So if you Google, there are plenty of sites that you can go to now that they can block certain sites, and you can block for certain periods of time. I have quite a few students that use those for themselves. So if you Google web blocking sites, you can find which apps, which programs are going to work with your computer system, or the platforms or the iPads that you have. And you're able to also get a little detail about that app or that website and make sure that's going to fit well within your within your home and with what your child is doing. But there are plenty of those to go to, but without knowing your system and things like that, you would need to go to Google it, and then you can go through. But there's quite a few that the students use that can keep them blocked for just periods of time. And there's also ways to, where you're not having those distractions from pop-ups and things like that. Because I have a lot of students that have those, and they're very distracting for the students.
Yeah, and I can definitely, in the follow-up email that we'll send out that has the copy of this recording, I can link you to one of our blogs that we have on our website that has some of these apps listed. I'm pretty sure we have different things for Apple versus Android as well. So I'm happy to share that on the email. Another question we have would be, how would you support a parent who struggles with consistency?
Okay, so whenever the student is having a hard time, whenever their child is having a hard time with being consistent. So whenever I'm working with students, what we have to do is, again, it comes back to having a detailed plan. With a habit, it doesn't have to be like the same time. Sometimes families are thinking, okay, it has to be 4 o'clock every single day. But it doesn't have to be the same time. It just has to be the same activity over and over and over again. So consistency can be just, okay, so we're going to do this at 8 o'clock, or we're going to do it 10 o'clock. But again, having a detailed plan of when you're going to fit that in. If you can do the activity every day at a period of time, like on Tuesday, it's better for us to do homework at 4 o'clock. But then on Wednesdays, it's better to do homework at 7 o'clock. And then having a cue that tells us. So again, going through those 3 steps. What is the cue? What is the routine? And then what is the reward for each thing that you're doing? But consistency is, the parent that brought that up, consistency is the key. So I would suggest in that is to come up with a detailed plan for each day that you're going to do it. And even if you can't get the whole entire task done, if you're able to get pieces of it done, it's going to start establishing that habit. So again, trying to come up with a time for each day that you're going to do it, and then at least pieces of it. And that's going to start establishing that habit. Okay.
Yeah, I personally, Jan, because I'm a parent of 2 elementary school students, so I struggle with consistency myself. The only thing that helps get me through that is I use my clock on my cell phone to set alarms for myself, to remind myself to do things with my kids or for the kids, or put things on Google Calendar. And if I've told my husband this too, if it's not on Google Calendar, it doesn't exist. So, for us, like even if we don't do things at the exact same time, if we have those reminders set to be able to do things, it really helps for those of us who are not consistent ourselves and being able to implement that for the students.
Right. That's wonderful point. I do have a lot of families that do the timers on their cell phones. That helps. And again, trying to connect that to a cue is going to help quite a bit, because you want to get it to the point where you're like, what did I forget to do something? What is it? And so usually when you do something, the cue will help you stay consistent with it, because it's going to remind you, oh, I forgot to do something. A lot of times kids will, again, connect it with their snack. A timer that going off is great. But then maybe, organizing their folders, their binders, maybe right after they brush their teeth, that's going to be a cue. Oh, this is when I organize my folders and binders for my next day, or get things set up for my next day. So trying to connect it to a cue really helps establish that habit pretty quickly. So.
Yeah, speaking of cues, we did have a parent that asked, could you give more examples of what a cue would be? I think some of us may be a little unsure of what a cue is.
Yes. Okay. Great question. Okay. A cue is something that tells you you're going to start something. So the cue, the most common one would be when you come home from school. Okay. So when I come home from school, my cue is I have a snack. A lot of kids have snacks when they come home. So the cue is I finished my snack. Okay, now this is when I do my homework. All right. So another cue would be, like I mentioned, after you brush your teeth at night. So a lot of kids like to organize for the next day. They'll do it the evening before, which is a great time to do that. So their cue would be right after I brush my teeth. Right after I brush my teeth is the cue. Okay, now is the time for me to go ahead and start setting up my, make sure I have my backpack, have my binders, have my folders, have everything that I need for the next day set in one spot. So the cue is right after I brush my teeth. So what you want to do is you want to think about different times of your day. So other cues would be when you get home from an activity. This is when I do something. Another cue is I have kids that they'll do their to-do list for their homework. And it's as soon as they get in the car, their parents will pick them up from school. They have a dry erase board in the car. And so as soon as they get in the car, that's their cue. Okay, on my dry erase board, I'm going to write all the things I have to get done for homework tonight. And so it's a period of time during the day. that tells you, okay, this is when I usually do this. And so that would be a cue. But the most popular cues are right whenever I get home, maybe right after an activity that they did. Okay, so if they have basketball practice or swimming practice, right after they finish that activity. And then another common one would be maybe after they brush their teeth, or right after dinner. This is when I start certain things.
Great. It sounds like it's either a behavior or an activity that is pretty consistent day to day.
Yes, yes.
Okay. So we had another question. We had maybe 4 different questions. I know we're running short on time, so we can try to get through as much of this as we can. What about kids on very rigorous schools where they have so much homework every night that they don't have much downtime for rewards in the immediate future? I feel like there's too much homework for a child his age. He's 11. Most nights he gets homework done, has maybe 20 minutes after dinner, and then it's time for bed. During the last year, they saw some burnout. Good habits towards the beginning of each semester and less good habits towards the end. Okay,
you cut out just a little bit there.
Sure.
So it sounds like they are starting strong, and
Yes.
they have it also sounds like they have the habit formed. But because they have so much work that they're doing, it's difficult for them to get their reward.
Okay. Right, because there's so little time after they finish their homework and then dinner and then bedtime.
Yes. So that can be very difficult. It sounds like the homework piece, depending on what their week looks like, if there's a way that you can take the homework, if it's not all due the next.
Jan is stuck. Jan, you cut out there. If it's not due the next day, can you start there?
Okay, so if it's not due the next day and you can break that task into a couple of days, that could be helpful. The other possibility, depending on the child's age, if it can be a delayed reward. So maybe a small reward in the evening time, but then working up towards a bigger reward maybe over the weekend when they have a little bit more time. So those are a couple of things I would suggest. One is if they can break it into other days, if that's a possibility. If not, small rewards during the evening, because you have to have an immediate reward in order for them to keep that habit up. But then trying to have the larger, or maybe something more planned out later when they do have more time, because that also will keep kids motivated and keep them consistent with that habit.
Do you have any suggestions for parents on how to pick a better reward with their student? We have a parent that expressed that they're trying to find the right reward, and they always involve her in the discussion, but focusing on shorter reward terms. But she loses interest before she earns the reward. So trying to pick like better rewards.
Right. So yes, this can be difficult, but finding something, if that's the case, you definitely are going to need to find smaller rewards that are immediate rewards. That, something that like sometimes the kids just like playing like short little games with their family, something like that. Before they are, going to sleep. They have, something that they enjoy that's maybe a 10 or 15 minute activity, and then trying to adjust the time so that you can do that. But it does sound like that student definitely needs something that's immediate, right at the end of that activity. And then if there's a way that they can have that immediate reward and then build up for something later in the weekend. But the smaller rewards, again, for kids tend to be, a lot of them just like doing, playing little games with their family. They have like little programs they like to watch, those types of things that they can do. Sometimes it's doing some type of craft, putting some kind of craft together. I have one student that just likes to go out and swim in the pool with, the family for just 15 minutes. So some of those little tiny rewards for 10 or 15 minutes are really going to go a long way. But it does take sometimes adjusting the schedule so that you can get that fit in. But I think that you're going to see rewards. You're going to see positive rewards out of that if you're able to do it.
We have just two quick ones.
Okay.
And then we'll wrap it up.
Okay.
With hybrid or virtual learning planned for the fall, what do you suggest for parents of teenagers who want to keep teenagers on a schedule that makes sense?
Oh, with virtual school?
With virtual or a hybrid of 2 days on, 2 days, in the school, 2 days on virtual.
Okay, so this is something that's going to be so new to everybody in the area. So it is going to be a day-to-day to see what's working. But what I would suggest is, as soon as you find out the schedule and what you're going to do, is taking time to come up with a detailed plan. That is going to be extremely important for kids that are doing the 2 days on and 2 days at home. Coming up with a detailed plan of what you're going to do when you come home from actual school, and what homework you're going to get accomplished, and then what you're going to do whenever you're at home. I suggest with kids that during that period of time that they would be in school, they are doing school activities. So it continues to be a school day, some type of school activity. And then coming up with a very detailed plan. So for all the families that I'm working with, we are coming up with detailed plans for those days that they're not at school. And so that their week looks like they're in school all week.
Okay. Yeah, and last couple, there's someone that says, do you have any suggestions on how to switch the habit of doing the fun thing first versus then getting the homework done, if at all? And then she tries to discuss having the feeling of accomplishment, et cetera, with her daughter who's 14, of trying to switch to doing the homework first and then getting the reward versus doing the fun thing first.
Okay, so are they asking about getting the homework, or getting having the reward first and then doing the homework?
So currently they're doing the fun thing first and then saying, oh, I'll do the homework later.
Okay, so it tends to work. You tend to be more successful whenever you get the work done first and then you have the reward. Now, if you have been doing the reward first, then and then you've been doing it the opposite direction, depending on what the reward is, if you can break that into a small reward at the very beginning, get the homework done, and then maybe finish whatever the reward is. Let's say you're playing a game. So you start the game, all right, play maybe one little section
round
of it,
or hand or something.
Of it. Yes, get the homework done, and then maybe do 2 more rounds of it. Without knowing what the reward is, I would try to limit the reward at the beginning, but still do it because that's what your routine has been. Do that, get the homework done, and then you can continue with the reward at the end. So then everything gets accomplished.
Yeah. Thanks, Jan. I know we didn't get to all of the questions, but we'll be sending a follow-up email with the recording. And then if anyone has any other questions, feel free to write back to us. Either myself, Ann, or Jan can write back to you and answer any other questions. Jan just put her email address up there if you want to write to her directly with any questions, jan@ectutoring.com. We also have some different webinars that are coming up, so I'll link that in the email as well if you'd like to participate on any of the other webinars coming up. Thank you so much for being here. Jan, thank you so much for helping out today. All right, thanks everybody. Take care.